Hey guys, it's Olivia here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you my February wrap-up. In the month of February, I joined in with Blackathon and with Adultathon. I finished all the prompts for Adultathon, although I did a switcheroo with one of my TBR books. So try and figure out which one it is and for which prompt, but if not, I've got all of my prompts and which books I read for which prompt down below for Adultathon. It was really fun. Thank you to everyone who joined in reading with me. And let's talk about the 11 books that I read last month. So first of all, I want to talk about Nevernight by J. Kristoff, and I buddy read this with Paging Serenity on Bookstagram, so I'll leave a link to her wonderful Instagram down below. And Nevernight follows Mia. She is a girl who is out for revenge. Her family have been split apart and torn apart and ruined by these members of a church, so she decides that she's going to become the best assassin that she can be to avenge their murders. And in order to do so, she has to become a blade in this kind of assassin school, and there's very, very high stakes. Everybody's been telling me to read this book, and I'm glad I finally did because I really, really enjoyed it. However, it didn't become a new favourite because of some technical reasons. The first one was that in the beginning it was a very, very slow book and it took a long time for me to get into it. And secondly, the footnotes. The footnotes were so unnecessary and were just info dumping in word building and just didn't need to be there. It took me out of the story and I felt like skipping them every time, but I didn't because I wanted to get the full reading experience. But yeah, the footnotes are entirely useless. However, I fell in love with Trick's character. I really, really love Mr. Kinley. The concept of Darkin is amazing, well described and so intriguing. All of the scenes in the library were great, and I love when we see an assassin actually, be an assassin, be very questionable and do assassinating things. It was such a fun read. I was so addicted and I cannot wait to read the sequel. By the way, Nevernight steamy scenes, also very good. Then I want to mention No Friend But the Mountain by Beirut Buchani, and this is an amazing book. It's a non-fiction memoir and it was written entirely on an iPhone, and those messages were smuggled out of the prison and then were translated because it's originally written in Farsi, and were translated by a translator and made into this book. And we follow Beirut as he is put into Manu prison and detained once he was trying to escape from Iran and move and immigrate into Australia. So it's all about his experiences in the prison, the horrific things that he had to go through, the conditions that they had to live in, and it also talks a bit about how he got there, so you get to see him doing a dangerous boat journey. And it was really hard-hitting with how upfront it is about all of the things that he had to face and confront. It's amazing that he's pulled through all of this, but at the same time he's also contemplating lots of themes that he is facing every day. He's discussing and thinking about death, about what it means to be courageous, about what it means to have your name taken away and things like that. So it's really deep, it's really emotional, and it's really thought-provoking. But as well as that, it's also written in a combination of prose and sometimes poetry, and I feel like the inclusion of poetry was really good because in Farsi it's quite a poetic language naturally, so it's nice to see that element of the original language within the prose. But also in these poems it just makes it whole because there's so much emotions that he's trying to process, and the way that he's processing them is through poetry, and it just made it all the more emotional. It was phenomenal. You see all those awards? It won all those awards for a reason. And I want to talk about The Night Marc by Tiffany Wrights. This is the second book of Tiffany's that I am reading, and it just reminded me how much I love historical romance fiction and subgenres of romance I really need to get back to. So in this one we're following Faye, and Faye is a widow who remarried and is currently getting a divorce for her marriage, and she is a story about a lighthouse and the daughter who drowned herself by the lighthouse and who left a father behind. And when she goes to explore the lighthouse, something happens and she ends up in 1921, and she ends up in the body of the daughter who goes on to drown herself. And it's all about the reasons why she's been brought back into this time, and a romance happens and a bit of time travel and a lot of themes about grief, about inconceivability and miscarriages, and again, love and death. I felt like this one was a pretty good book. It had some flaws. I felt like the romantic side of things got a bit problematic sometimes because these characters had no sense of self-preservation. It was all that let me die in your place and without you I'll die kind of thing, which I'm a bit over and I don't really enjoy much. And then as well as that, there's just some other elements that were a bit touch and go, but then there were things that I really did like. I found that these steamy scenes were very well done and really good. I feel like Tiffany Wright's writing is just brilliant. She could write about paint drying and I'd still be so happy to read it. And I also I fell in love with the characters in the story. There's a side character who's the Black Death Girl back in 1921, and I really appreciated that because yes, there were disabled people back in 1921 and they could live as well and survive. So it was nice to see that, even though Dolly was a secondary character. And all in all, it was just a lot of fun. I read Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, and this is a horror suspense novel. And in this novel, we follow these 3 women who are sent to this place called Area X. They're not quite sure what to expect when they get there, that they've been tasked the mission of discovering and exploring this landscape that is very mysterious, and there have been other expeditions into this landscape before. There have been 11 expeditions into this landscape before, and all of these expeditions have failed, so they know it's a dangerous place. They're unsure of what they're going into, but they are sent in to find out what they can. And this book, while it's only 200 pages, gripped me so much. It's so unlike what I usually enjoy because it's very plot driven, not character driven at all. You don't even get to know the characters' names, but the suspense was so tense and high. I just had to know what was happening. I had so many questions and I wanted answers. This book is quite weird and whimsical as well. Think Alice in Wonderland weird, but if Alice in Wonderland was an adult horror novel, so do be ready for that weirdness. It's not something I tend to like, but I really did enjoy it here. I'm not sure how I feel about the ending. I'm not sure if it left me wanting or satisfied, but it is what it is. And in the end, I quite enjoyed this book. I also read I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou, and this is her non-fiction memoir. It kind of follows her from her youngest age until when she's about 16 to 18, I believe. So it's kind of her teenage childhood years, and it's non-fiction, so it's just following her life, and it's quite poetic and beautifully written, which is evidently going to happen because Maya Angelou is a poet herself, and Maya has gone through so much. You see her living through racism and segregation. You see her moving between living with her grandparents and living with her mother, or living with her father, and she has her brother who is with her sometimes and also not with her at other times, but she goes through so much that's kind of mind-blowing, some of the things that she's been through, and she's still managed to become such a strong woman at the end of it. It's so impressive. I do have to say that the fat phobia in this one hindered my enjoyment. The descriptions of some people were not that nice and not that enjoyable to read. And while I did learn a lot from this memoir and enjoy it, it didn't blow me away as much as I was expecting it to. Maya has been through so much and the writing is so beautiful, but it just didn't pull me or intrigue me. I can't quite put my finger on it. It was still a really good read, and I really much appreciated getting to hear her story and hear from her herself. What a woman. Then I continued on to read Letter to My Daughter by Maya Angelou, and this one is a short collection of essays and a little bit of poetry by her. You could read this in one sitting. That's how short these essays are. Some of them are about 3 pages long, and then some of them are only about 7, so it's not really that long. And while I didn't agree with everything that she says in here, I do think that her essays are very direct, to the point, and quite open-minded. She has definitely learned a lot, and some of it again has to do with her personal experiences and her personal life. Shocking what she's been through. I think this one shocked me even more than I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings sometimes. Some terrible things have happened to her, but she's pulled through and she's turned into such a wise and strong woman, and she shares a lot of that wisdom with you here, and I've really enjoyed reading this one. But what I enjoyed the most about this book had to be the poetry that was at the end. She has a few pages of poetry, and her rhythm is so unique, but it's so good. And her subject matters to her poems are, of course, very important and very well written. And now I know that I need to stop reading her non-fiction and go and get myself a poetry collection of hers, because I'm going to enjoy it so much. So much. Then I read Your Silence Will Not Protect You by Audre Lorde, and Audre Lorde is my favorite essayist and one of my favorite poets. So this one is a collection of some of her essays and some of her poems which have to do with not being silent and speaking up for yourself and speaking up for your rights. If you don't know Audre Lorde, she was a Black feminist, lesbian writer, and her poetry is absolutely amazing. It has a lot to do with her own thoughts and emotions and feelings and her own experiences, but a lot have to do with being Black, female, and a lesbian. Also, her essays in this one had me wanting to say like amen, hallelujah, and preach it, sister, at the end of them, because they are so on point. They are so true, to do with intersectionality, in feminism, in LGBT plus rights, in Black rights, and how we should all be supporting each other, whether it comes to being a Black man or a Black woman or a woman of color or a white woman. We should all be supporting each other because we are all fighting for the same causes. And I really, really appreciated how inclusive her essays were, but also how important and true they were. I had read some of them in the past because she is my favorite essayist, but this collection introduced me to some new ones, and I just loved learning more about her own experiences, but also hearing some of the things that she has to say, still so relevant today. Audre Lorde, you were amazing and a blessing unto this earth. And this was an absolute new favourite for me. I gave it 5 stars. In my January wrap-up, I mentioned that my favourite read of the month was Kindred by Octavia E. Butler, so of course I continued on to read more of her books, and I read Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. Now this one is a post-apocalyptic story, and it's set in America where the world has gone to ruins. Everyone builds these walls around their villages so that they can survive, and lots of people are hopped up on this drug which goes by different names, but it induces you to want to set fires to everything and basically ruin everything by burning. And lots of people are homeless, lots of people are starving, and lots of death is going on. So in the middle of all of this, we have our main protagonist, Lauren, and she is the daughter of a preacher. And she has hyperempathy, which means that if you hurt yourself, she can feel that same pain herself, which is not ideal in a world where there's lots of violence raging and you might need to protect yourself, which means causing pain to others, and you might feel it too. This one also has quite a few religious themes in it, and not the religion that you would expect. It's not following a traditional Christian or Muslim or Jewish religion, but more so she is figuring out her own religion and what she wants to believe and what she believes God is herself. So it's kind of a bit of a creative take on that, but I did want to mention there are religious themes because that's not for everyone. And I really did enjoy this one. At some point it dragged a little bit because there is a moment where the characters travel, as is often in post-apocalyptic stories, and travel narratives are not my favorite. However, that is not the whole entirety of the book. It's just a bit in the middle, and other than that, I think it was a really, really interesting perspective on the future of what we might be driven to, of what is goodness and God and her own opinion of that. And I also really liked the plot twist that happened. I didn't see it coming, and it got me. It did get me. We've got a bit of racism and race, and as well as that, men and masculinity and feminism and gender being discussed in this book, as well as hyperempathy and what that means. I feel like it did a very good job of lightly showing race, because to be honest, in post-apocalyptic stories, when do we ever get to see people of colour as a main character? I don't have memory of one like that. So it was really nice to read this one. I don't think it's my favourite of hers, but it was still good enough for me to go and want to read even more of her books. 5 stars are really going to the pale pink books this month, but I had to give Eggshell Skull by Bree Lee 5 stars. This is another memoir, and it is heavily, heavily about sexual assault and rape. Just need to put that out there, but I do have trigger warnings for all of my books in the comments section down below. So Eggshell Skull is a memoir following Bree, and she is a starting out lawyer. She's going to be interning for this lawyer, and the lawyer that she is interning as an associate for often gets the sexual assault trials and cases, and time again Bree Lee gets to see these men getting off with atrocious acts because there's not enough evidence, because women are not looking a certain way, because they're of a certain ethnicity, etc., all the reasons why the law fails women. And it talks a lot about feminism and some of the sexism that is ingrained in the law system, but also in the everyday. I also like that this one was set in Australia, as I am an Australian. I've been trying to read more Australian literature. You do get a feel for Australia in this one, and there's some Australian terminology used. And while it is focusing on the Australian law system, you can see how this applies to other law systems around the world as well. But as well as that, Bree has her own sexual assault history and story. So of course, being in all of these cases is very triggering for her. And it's about whether she wants to make a stand and go on trial herself for her own case, or whether she will not do it, or if she does, what the outcome of that is. This book took me a while to get through. I typically read a book in 1 to 3 days, and I think this one took me 5 to 6 or something, because I had to keep putting it down because my emotions were strong. I was feeling so angry at the way these women are treated when they are brave enough to get up and talk about their story and tell their story, expecting the law to do them justice and the law failing them time and time again. It made my blood boil. It made me so sad. It was also scary how often these stories happened, and at some point I wrote in my review notes that a complaint I had for this book was that sometimes it got repetitive, and then I sat back and thought to myself, it's scary. It's scary that these cases are getting repetitive, because it means the same cases are happening over and over again and justice isn't being served. And then I thought, actually, that just adds to the book and shows the reality of the situation. There are also some triggers for eating disorders and depression. I just want to throw them out there because it has a lot to do with all of the emotions that Bree is having while she's going through trial after trial. And I'll leave more trigger warnings down below, but this was some kind of spectacular. It was written in a way that's very easy to read, and I just urge literally everyone to read it. While there is a lot of law jargon, it's all very well explained and understandable. I read The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy, and this is one that I've been meaning to read for a very long time, so I'm glad I finally got around to it. However, I did find it a little bit disappointing. So in this one we follow Rahel and Esther, and they are a brother-sister twin duo who live in India, and basically something has happened in their past which tore apart their family and left them both with a lot of traumatic experiences, and we kind of meet them in the future and what they've become, and we kind of rewind into the past and see where they end up and what happened. However, the storytelling in this one really bothered me. So while the writing style is very detailed and very beautiful, it just didn't work for me because this one doesn't follow a chronological timeline. It drifts from the past to the future to the present and all around a little bit, which I don't really mind. However, at the same time as drifting along timelines, it was drifting along various characters' timelines, and I don't just mean Rahel and Esther, it also follows quite a few other characters, and because we jumped around their timelines so much, sometimes we were hearing about characters we couldn't care about yet, although we would come to care about them later because they are very involved in what happened. But because we're not involved in them yet, I didn't appreciate their storylines, and seeing their past, I didn't really care about it. So for a lot of the time I was frustrated that we weren't following the characters that I was caring about, we weren't in the right time slot that I was caring about. So the drifting around kind of didn't work for me, and as well as that, I didn't feel a deep connection to any of the characters. And when you've got such a character-driven story like this, where the plot is semi-predictable but at the same time semi-not, but it's emotions that you're trying to play on, the fact that I didn't connect to any of the characters was a really big problem. I will say that the ending was quite amazing. Like, what happened at the end totally blew my mind, and it was emotional and it was dark and it was deep. And this one is tackling some very serious themes such as caste discrimination, such as dysfunctional family situations, and it goes into a lot of things, and I'm going to leave trigger warnings down below. But while this one I feel is important, I didn't enjoy reading it, and I was quite bored for the majority of the book. Beginning to middle, I was completely bored. It was only the end that stood out to me, so a bit of a mixed bag for this one, and it was quite a shame because that's a 5-star prediction. I also read Glitterland Aftermath by Alexis Hall, and this is a short novella which follows these two characters of Glitterland, the main novel, so you're definitely needing to read the first one before you can get to this one. It's only 28 pages long, Very short, very quick, but oh my goodness, it is so, so cute. It follows immediately after the events of the first book, and the first book follows these two characters who are very, very British. One of them is from Essex, he's into fashion, he's quite flamboyant and extra, and then the other one is this moody, upper class, semi-rich Englishman who is bipolar and has strong anxiety, and it's basically them after the fact and trying to chart being together in a new way, and how that's going to work out with all of the different parts of their personalities that they have to fit together, and also some of the mental health issues that they need to work through together. So yes, it was just really, really cute. It put a huge smile on my face and made me so happy to read this one. I just love Alex Hall's romance books so much. And that is it, guys. Those are the 11 books I read in the month of February. Please let me know in the comment section down below what was your favourite read of the month of February, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't you forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.